I was around 22 years old when this happened. I had just moved into a small house with 3 other guys. None of us really knew each other before living together, but we all went to the same college and finished at the same time. After graduating, we were all looking for a place to stay and somehow ended up finding this affordable house on the edge of a quiet town called Milton. It wasn't the best place, but splitting the rent 4 ways made it manageable. The area was a bit far from the city center, but it was quiet and peaceful. Everything was fine for the first few months. We didn't talk all the time, but there were no issues. We had a routine. Then things started to change. After about 9 months of living together, 2 of the guys suddenly decided to move out. They didn't really explain why. It just happened fast. That left me with the only one I barely spoke to, Eli. He was a quiet one. He worked a lot and didn't talk much even when he was around. It kind of sucked that the other 2 left, because at least I had a bond with them. Eli and I were just strangers sharing a house. Worst part was, now the rent was just the 2 of us. We both knew it wasn't going to work long term, so we agreed to go our separate ways once the lease ended in 3 months. That was a plan, but those 3 months didn't go how I expected. The house suddenly felt much bigger, and Eli felt even more distant. I had days off from work and would stay home alone the whole day. Eli was barely there. He only worked morning shifts, so I assumed he must have had friends he spent time with every evening, or maybe a girlfriend. But honestly, it felt strange how late he stayed out. And when he did come home, he wouldn't say anything, just straight to his room. No greetings, no eye contact. At first, I liked the peace and quiet, but over time, it became too quiet. Almost unnatural. Something about the whole vibe started to bother me. One night, I stayed up later than usual. It was around 1 a.m. I was in my room watching videos on my laptop when I saw a car headlights flash through my window. I knew it had to be Eli because no one else visited us. I heard the front door open and decided to say hi. I didn't want us to be total strangers. I opened my door right as I heard footsteps rushing through the hallway. Eli must have seen me because he suddenly froze right outside his room. It was weird. The lights in the hallway were off, so I could only make out his shape, but I could clearly see his eyes, wide open, like he'd seen a ghost. "Hey, Eli, just saying what's up," I said, trying to keep it casual. But he just stood there, frozen, staring at me. After a few seconds, he mumbled, "I'm good." That was it. He didn't say anything else. Just went into his room and shut the door behind him. The way he moved and looked at me gave me chills. It wasn't just awkward, it felt off. I didn't think much of it right away, but I couldn't get that image of his wide eyes out of my head. Something wasn't right, and I started to pay more attention to him. Later that night, I opened my door again. I wanted to walk past his room just to listen for any strange sounds. I wasn't trying to spy, I was just curious. As I walked past, I heard drawers slamming inside. It sounded like he was searching for something, but in a panicked way. I stood still and leaned a little closer to the door. The noise continued, drawers opening and closing, things shifting around fast. Then suddenly, it stopped. Complete silence. My heart started beating faster. I didn't want to stay there any longer. Right when I was about to walk away, his door swung open. Eli stood there, same wide eyes, staring right at me. I didn't know what to say, so I quickly blurted out, "I was heading to the kitchen. Want anything?" He didn't answer at first. Then he muttered, "No," and slowly closed the door again. I went into the kitchen like I said I would, grabbed a glass of water, and went back to my room. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept hearing soft movements in the hallway. Eli didn't make any loud noise, but I could feel that he was awake and moving around. It made me uneasy. Over the next week, I kept watching him more. I wouldn't go to bed until I heard him get home and go to his room. Something about him had changed. He looked tired all the time, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red and restless. He didn't talk to me at all, just walked past me like I didn't exist. But then something even weirder happened. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard a knock on my door. I hadn't heard any footsteps in the hallway. It scared me. I hesitated, then slowly opened the door. Eli was standing there, same tired eyes, but now he had a small smile, like he was trying too hard. He said he just got home but thought he dropped his wallet somewhere in the driveway. He asked if I had a flashlight and could help him find it. That surprised me. Eli had never asked me for help with anything. I was tired, but I thought maybe this was a chance to fix the tension between us. So I grabbed a flashlight and followed him outside. The night was cold and quiet. Too quiet. As we walked down the gravel driveway, I noticed his car was parked really far, almost at the very end near the woods. That seemed odd. Usually, we park closer to the house. We started looking for the wallet, but I didn't see anything. Then he started walking past his car, leading me toward the trees. I followed for a bit, shining the flashlight around. I finally asked, "Why are we going into the woods?" Eli paused and said he had gone for a short walk earlier, so maybe he dropped it there, but it didn't feel right. Something was off about the way he said it. The further we walked, the more nervous I got. I stopped and told him, "Hey, I've got work early tomorrow. You can take the flashlight. I'm heading back." I tried to hand it to him. He didn't take it. He just stood there with that forced smile slowly fading. His eyes looked angry now. He didn't say anything. I stood there for a second, waiting for a response, but nothing. So I turned around and walked fast back toward the house. I kept glancing behind me. He was just standing there, watching me, not moving. When I got inside, I locked the door and started packing. I couldn't stay there anymore. Something wasn't right. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept listening, waiting for sound of him coming back, but I didn't hear anything. He never came back that night. In the morning, I grabbed all my important stuff, threw it in the car, and left. I never looked back. Even years later, I never heard from Eli again. No messages, no calls. I don't know what he was planning that night, but I'm sure it wasn't just about a wallet. I think he was trying to lead me into those woods for something else. Something bad. I lived with a guy named Kelvin for about 2 years in a small rented house near the edge of a quiet town called Lakeside. We weren't best friends or anything like that. We'd been roommates back in college for a year, and we just ended up sticking together after we graduated. Both of us were still figuring out what to do next, and since we were used to living together, it just made sense to keep sharing a place. The first year was pretty smooth. We didn't have any big arguments, and things were chill enough that we both agreed to renew the lease when it ended. Everything felt normal until around 2 months into the second year. One night, I got home late from my shift at the local diner. Kelvin and I chatted in the kitchen for a bit before heading to our rooms to sleep. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of slow footsteps in the hallway. The floorboards in our house creaked when someone walked over them, and the noise moved toward the front of the house like someone was pacing. I figured Kelvin was just grabbing a drink or something. I didn't think much of it and went back to sleep. Early the next morning, I was rushing to leave for work when Kelvin came out of his room looking groggy and asked me why I was walking around in the middle of the night. I told him I wasn't, and I thought he was. We both just kind of stared at each other, confused, but I had to leave, so we didn't talk more about it. Later that evening, Kelvin was out working his night shift, so I had the house to myself. I spent the time relaxing in my room, watching videos on my phone and eating leftovers. I didn't think much about the night before, but around 3 a.m. again, I woke up to that same slow creaking sound. This time, I didn't fall back asleep so fast. I listened carefully and heard it go from the hallway into the living room. It was so steady, like actual footsteps. After a pause, everything went silent. That's when I got up and opened my bedroom door. The living room was empty. The lights were off. I looked around for a bit, but didn't find anything out of place. I felt unsettled because the noise seemed so real. If it wasn't Kelvin and it wasn't me, then who or what was walking around? The next morning, I mentioned it again to Kelvin, and we both tried to come up with some explanation. Maybe the old house was settling or the wind outside was strong enough to cause movement. But something didn't sit right with me. That day, Kelvin had the day off, but I had to go to work at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. When I got home close to 11 p.m., the house was quiet. As I walked past his room, I saw Kelvin sitting on the edge of his bed. I said, "Hey man," just in passing, and went to my room. He didn't say anything back, which was a little weird, but I thought maybe he didn't hear me. I got changed and left my room to grab a snack. On my way to the kitchen, I noticed that Kelvin's bedroom light was off now. I peeked in and saw him still sitting there in the dark, barely visible. I asked, "You okay?" But he didn't answer. He just sat there, silent. I didn't know what to do. He'd never acted like this before, but I figured maybe he was just having a rough day. I went to the kitchen, made a quick sandwich, and came back toward my room. Now his door was shut. I didn't hear him close it, which struck me as odd. Back in my room, I tried to focus on my phone again, but something didn't feel right. I couldn't shake the image of him sitting in that dark room. I was thinking about texting him when I suddenly heard those slow, creaking sounds again, right outside my door. I looked over and saw a shadow move on the crack. My heart started pounding. I picked up my phone and texted Kelvin, asking if he was walking around. A few minutes passed before he replied, "Huh? I'm not even home right now." My blood went cold. I jumped out of bed and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Kelvin's door was wide open now. I didn't hear it open. I stepped forward slowly, my skin crawling. I peered into the room, and that's when I saw him. Not Kelvin. A man, standing in the middle of the room. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a thick beard. I froze for a moment, trying to make sense of it. Then I turned and bolted out the front door. I stood across the street and called the police, my hand shaking. When they arrived and searched the house, the man was gone. There weren't any signs of forced entry. One window in the laundry room was unlocked, but it didn't look like it had been used recently. The officers did a full sweep and said they'd let us know if anything turned up. Nothing ever did. Kelvin, and I couldn't believe it. The thought that someone had been inside the house, walking around at night while we were sleeping, was terrifying. But what scared me more was how long he had been there. The creaking floorboards had been going on for nights. That meant the man had been in the house before, watching, waiting. Even more disturbing was his choice to be in Kelvin's room, sitting there, quietly, in the dark. That night happened to be the one time Kelvin wasn't home in the evening. It's as if the man knew our schedules, as if he was waiting for the perfect time. Maybe he thought Kelvin would be alone. Maybe he was planning to hurt him. Kelvin moved out within a week. I left a month after. We never figured out who the man was or what he wanted. But I still think about that night. The silence, the way he just stood there in the dark, and how close he got without either of us knowing. Some nights, I still wake up at 3 a.m. listening for footsteps, wondering if he ever left that house at all. Back in 2015, when I was 23, I decided to use an online classified site to find a roommate to help cover rent in my 2-bedroom apartment. At the time, it was pretty normal to use those platforms for this sort of thing. People didn't really bat an eye about it. There weren't as many options back then either, and the platform hadn't become as sketchy as people consider it now. I uploaded a listing with a few decent pictures of my place, highlighting the living room, kitchen, and spare bedroom, and I made it clear I was looking for someone around my age to move in. A few days later, I received a message from a woman named Clara. She said she was 23 as well and currently finishing her final year in college. We talked on the phone for about 30 minutes, and she seemed easy to talk to, pretty normal, even funny. She had similar interests and didn't seem like someone who'd throw parties or be messy. We agreed that she'd swing by the next day to check the place out, and when she came, everything went smoothly. She liked the apartment. We got along well in person, and after a short chat, we agreed on rent, utilities, and a move-in date. She moved in within the week. The only thing that seemed slightly off to me was that Clara looked older than 23. She was tall, carried herself with the kind of maturity I wasn't expecting, and had features that made her look closer to 30. I figured maybe she just looked mature for her age. The first few days after Clara moved in went by pretty fast. We didn't really get a chance to talk much, since we were both busy. I had a full-time job that kept me out of the house from morning to late evening, and Clara was juggling both school and a part-time job. We passed each other in the kitchen occasionally, exchanged a few hellos, and that was about it. Then, on the 5th day after she moved in, I got home from work a little after 10 p.m. The apartment was quiet. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and the moment the door clicked shut behind me, I heard fast footsteps coming from the hallway. They rushed past and the door slammed shut. I froze in place, confused and a little startled. I put my work bag down and cautiously walked over to the hallway that led to our rooms. Clara's door was closed, with the light on beneath it, but mine was wide open. I was certain I closed it when I left that morning. I walked inside slowly, half expecting to see something out of place. But after looking around, nothing looked touched. Nothing was moved or missing. Maybe I'd left the door open and didn't remember. It still felt weird, like I caught someone snooping. I let it go for the moment, trying to convince myself I was overthinking it. I sat on my bed and started watching TV, trying to relax. An hour passed without any noise from Clara's room, and I figured she must have already gone to sleep. She had mentioned on her first day that she preferred going to bed early due to her long days. I tried to focus on the show I was watching, but something pulled my attention away. Out of habit, I glanced toward my bedroom door and noticed something that made my stomach tighten. There was a shadow, a very still shadow beneath the door, like someone was standing directly outside of it. At first, I just stared, frozen. Then I called out softly, "Clara?" No response. I waited a few seconds. "Clara? Are you out there?" Still no answer. But then the shadow moved, slowly backing away from the door, and then I heard her bedroom door shut. My heart was racing now. Why had she been standing there? How long was she out there? I didn't understand what was happening. I got up and locked my door immediately. I stayed up longer than usual that night, watching old sitcoms just to calm my nerves. The next morning, I bumped into Clara in the kitchen while making coffee. I tried to be polite and casually mentioned last night, asking if she needed something. She just smiled, said everything was fine, and walked away. I didn't want to press it and make things awkward so soon after she'd moved in, but it didn't sit right with me. A few minutes later, she left for class, and I didn't see her again until much later that evening. That night, I came home around the same time, close to 10:30. The apartment was dark and quiet, lights off in every room, including Clara's. I figured she'd gone to sleep early again. I tiptoed to my room, careful not to make noise. I called a friend on FaceTime for about 15 minutes, just chatting about random stuff to wind down after the long day. Then I hopped in the shower. While I was rinsing off, I thought I heard something from outside my bathroom. It wasn't loud, more like a subtle sound, a soft creak or movement. I turned the water down for a second and listened. Nothing. Maybe just the building settling. It was an old apartment after all. I finished up, stepped out of the bathroom, and dried off. But then I looked toward my bedroom door, and it was open. I knew I had closed it. My heart dropped into my stomach. I quickly dressed and peeked into the hallway. Still dark, still quiet. Clara's door was closed, and her light was off. I was officially creeped out now. I closed my door again and made sure to lock it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I was sure I'd locked it before getting into the shower, but maybe I had forgotten in the rush. Either way, I wasn't taking chances anymore. I sat back down, turned on my TV, and tried to distract myself. The whole thing just didn't make sense. Why would she open my door? Did she even open it? Could I be imagining things? But the unease in my chest said otherwise. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't deny that anymore. I stayed up another hour, flipping between channels and trying to calm myself down. The air in the apartment felt heavier now, like a strange tension was hovering. I had only known Clara for a few days. There hadn't been enough time to really get to know her, to know what kind of person she was or what her boundaries were. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I kept rationalizing. Maybe she needed something. Maybe she was confused. Maybe it wasn't her at all. Eventually, Exhaustion took over. I turned everything off, got under the covers, and closed my eyes. The room was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Still, I managed to fall asleep, for a while at least. When I opened my eyes again, it felt like barely any time had passed. I didn't know why I'd woken up. The room was completely dark, and I couldn't hear anything. Not even the typical hum of the refrigerator or distant city traffic. Just the creaking of the old apartment around me. I rubbed my eyes and turned to look at the clock on my nightstand, but stopped when I saw the door. It was open. Not wide, just cracked. Maybe 2 or 3 inches, but I knew I'd locked it. I was 100% certain this time. And that's when dread settled in. My heart started pounding. I whispered Clara, hoping maybe she'd respond from the hallway and offer some explanation. But no one answered. The silence felt loud, like it was pressing in from all sides. I sat up slowly, eyes fixed on the sliver of darkness between the door and the frame. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like someone was on the other side of it, staring in. I was terrified to move. Then my eyes adjusted to the dark. I scanned the corners of my room, and that's when I saw her. Clara was standing in the far corner of my room, completely still, barely visible in the shadows. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. She was there, no doubt about it, just standing there in the dark, not saying a word. I couldn't breathe. My body froze. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even seem to be blinking. She just stood there like a statue. I must have stared at her for 30 full seconds before I finally found the strength to speak. "Clara?" My voice cracked. Still no reply. "What are you doing in here?" I whispered. She tilted her head slightly but didn't answer. I couldn't make out her expression. I was too scared to turn on the light. Too scared to get out of bed. Eventually, after what felt like hours, she slowly turned and walked out of my room without closing the door. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I kept the light on, watching that doorway, too afraid to even blink in case she came back. I must have sat in that position, wrapped in my blankets, until the sun finally came up. When morning arrived, the apartment felt different. The sunlight made it feel less haunted, though the fear hadn't completely faded. I left my room hesitantly, peeking down the hallway toward Clara's room. Her door was shut. I didn't want to knock. I didn't want to even acknowledge what had happened until I could make sense of it. I left the apartment without saying a word. At work, I kept replaying the moment in my head. Maybe she was sleepwalking. Maybe she had night terrors. But then why didn't she say anything when I spoke to her? Why didn't she react like a person waking up in someone else's room? She was fully aware. That much I was sure of. That night, I didn't go home right away. I stalled, ran errands I didn't need to run, sat in my car for a while, even considered booking a hotel. Eventually, I talked myself into going back. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe Clara just had a weird night. Maybe it wasn't as creepy as I remembered it. But the moment I walked in and saw her sitting at the kitchen table with that same smile, I knew I hadn't imagined anything. She looked at me like nothing had happened. I tried to be casual, asked her how her day went. She kept her answers short, sweet, pleasant, but vague, like she was skimming the surface of a much deeper pool she didn't want to look into. I didn't bring up what happened. I couldn't. Every time I thought about it, a chill ran through me. I started avoiding her after that. If I heard her coming out of her room, I stayed in mine. If I needed to eat or shower, I did while she was out. The apartment became a place I didn't feel safe in anymore. I began locking my door obsessively, not just at night, but every single time I entered my room, even if it was just to grab something. I didn't sleep much. Even with the door locked, I kept waking up at random hours, afraid I'd see her in the corner again. There were no more incidents for the next few days. Nothing out of the ordinary, but that's what made it worse. The waiting, the silence, the calm before the next thing happened. Because I knew it wasn't over. And I was right. A week later, it happened again. I came home late from work, past 11 p.m., and everything was quiet. Clara's door was shut and all the lights were off. I felt a weird sense of deja vu, like I was stepping back into a nightmare I hadn't fully escaped. I went into my room, locked the door, and got ready for bed. I didn't shower that night. I was too paranoid to be vulnerable for that long. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound. Around 1 a.m., I finally started drifting off. But then, out of nowhere, I heard something, a faint creak. I sat up immediately and looked at the door. Still locked. But then I heard another sound, right behind me. I whipped around, and there she was. Clara was in my room again. I don't know how she got in. I didn't hear the door unlock, and I'm sure it was still bolted. She was standing next to my dresser, staring at the mirror, not at me, just watching herself in the reflection, dead silent. I couldn't even scream. My throat closed up with fear. I finally managed to grab my phone and fumbled to turn on the flashlight. The second the light hit her, she blinked slowly and turned toward me. Her face was blank. No emotion, just this eerie calm. I said her name again, louder this time. "Clara, what are you doing?" She didn't answer. She just walked slowly toward the door, opened it, and left. That was it. I didn't sleep a second after that. I stayed awake until sunrise and packed a bag the moment there was enough daylight. I didn't care if it was rude or if I owed her an explanation. I left, went to stay with a friend, and never went back. A week later, I hired someone to help me move out my things. Clara wasn't there. She'd vanished. The landlord told me she'd never signed any lease documents. All the personal information she gave me, fake. I tried looking her up online. Nothing. No social media. No school records. It was like she never existed. I still don't know who she really was, or what she wanted. Years have passed, but I still have nightmares about her. Sometimes I wake up convinced she's standing in the corner of my room again. I haven't had a roommate since. I don't even feel comfortable sleeping with the door unlocked anymore, no matter where I live. Every once in a while, I'll hear a creak at night and freeze, thinking somehow she found me again. I've never been able to make sense of what happened. Was she mentally unstable? A stalker? Something else entirely? I've told this story to close friends, but I always downplay the parts that sound too strange, too unreal. Because the truth is, even I can't fully believe it sometimes. But I lived it, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you never really know who someone is. Not from a phone call, not from a friendly smile, and certainly not from a roommate ad online.